All right, so now, okay, I don't want to repeat all that. So let's just go back to introductions. We have an esteemed panel, and we're very thankful to each and every one of you. We have Sister Cleola Brown, who is currently the president of the A. Philip Randolph Organization Institute. Okay, hold on. We have Mary Bowens. Mary is with the Grand Rapids Education Association. She is currently the president. We also have Dan Tenhoppen. He is with the Heart of West Michigan United Way. He is a labor liaison. I believe we have Diana Kitola with the United Auto Workers International Representative. Is Diane present? I'm not seeing.
I don't think Diane's here.
I'm sorry?
I don't think she's here yet.
I don't think she's here. All right, moving on. We have Ryan Bennett, West Michigan.
Oh, Diane, is that Diane? Diane's here.
Hi, Diane. You're muted, Diane. So we have Diana Kitola, United Auto Workers International Representative. We also have Ryan Bennett, West Michigan Plumbers, Fitters, and Service Trades Local 174. He is the business manager. We have panelist Sean Egan with the International Brotherhood of Electrical Workers, Local 275. He's Director of Labor, State of Michigan Deputy Director of Labor. We have Paul McLennan, retired member of the Amalgamated Transit Union Local 732 out of Atlanta, Georgia. I believe that exhausts the number of actual panelists. Is that not correct, Terry? Kathy?
That's it. We have everyone.
All right, then. So everybody else is, and we are glad to have everyone else. Some folks' names are showing up. Some folks are not. If you have questions, please feel free to put your questions and or comments into the chat feature, and Kathy will make note of those, and we will do our very best to get to each and every one of them. In the interest of everyone's time, let me just move forward and ask the first question. I spent a little time in the Pentecostal church, and so let me just ask, as we used to say, all minds clear before we get started? Okay, okay, all right. So, obviously we're living in a very intense moment, a moment of real self-reflection, and we're looking closely at a lot of things that heretofore we have not perhaps thought about as much, including workers. And we are now hearing almost in every news cycle about essential workers. We also, many of us on this call have for a number of years thought that workers were essential anyway. And we've been angry a lot of times because the actual role of workers has not been adequately acknowledged. So let me ask you, with all that's going on in the country today, we hear so much about structural racism in policing across this country. I want to ask each of our panelists, why did you decide to participate in this panel on racism in the labor movement? And since the storm seems to be popping where you are, President Brown, would you please go first? Kathy, is she muted?
Oh, unmute.
Okay. Kathy, if you mute us, we can't unmute ourselves. So
Uh-oh.
thank you for opening my line. Let me just say a couple of things. Good evening, everyone. First of all, let me start with that. And I hope everyone can hear me. If you can, please raise your hand. Oh, great. Okay. In our history, and Kathy did a fine job of reviewing exactly who we are as an institute. In our history lies the quirk that brought the Institute to the labor movement in the very beginning. Randolph took 12 years to organize the sleeping car porters. And in doing so, there was not an open door that was offered to him or them at the conclusion of a very hard effort to come into the AFL. And it was prior to the CIO becoming a part of the overall organization. Because systemic racism existed then, as some of it still exists now. And the trades themselves, as they were known because they were porters, offered a threat to a baseline of wages that folks were not warm and fuzzy about those numbers being infiltrated. But Randolph had a vision that was just really so vitally clear. He did not talk about it in black and white. What he talked about was right and wrong, and the right to be able to earn a living that would sustain those porters who were running up and down the East Coast primarily to earn a living wage to support their families. The majority of them were men, but there were also women that were a part of the organization as well during that time. And as such, the wages fluctuated, first of all, internally inside of the sleeping car porters based on sex, which was a whole nother kind of fight that was going on at the same time that we were talking about fairness of a living wage inside of the labor movement. There tends to be always a difference that people will look for. But the beauty of it is calling it out so that it can stop and working collectively so that it will turn into those things that are absolute rights for all of us. Now, the racism that we're hearing a lot about today, and I know we will get an opportunity to talk extensively about it as the conversation materializes more and more, took a turn with deaths. And that's not unlike what's happened in the past, because there were times that porters came up missing during their run along the eastern seaboard. And there were times that they were beaten when assumed privileges after crossing the Mason-Dixon line. So there are pieces that will show itself as a repeat of history as this dialogue continues. And hopefully by the time we get to right now, what's happening right now, there will be some trust among us as a group to have a real open and frank and transparent conversation. So why did I get in? Because I'm female, because I'm Black, because I'm a Southerner, and because I was afraid of my mother, because she said, you're going to earn a living and you will do it in a place where you can help somebody else. All of my family comes out of the plants, whether it's a textile mill, and Paul knows that, Paul McLennan, who's on this line, I've known his face and his name for over 43 years, or whether it is in a fancy place up north where a lot of my ancestors ran to, whether it was Detroit or Chicago or some of the others, looking for a way to take care of ourselves with the pride and dignity that all workers deserve. So that's why I came, and that's why the struggle does continue. And that's why I'm looking forward to this evening where we can have an open and transparent conversation about the different kinds of racism that exist internally and among the same races as well. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Sister Brown. Sister Mary Bowens, will you go next, please? Kathy, I believe she's still muted.
There we go. Thank you for having me here today. I wanted to, I got another screen up here. Okay. As an educator, I've got 35 years in the classroom, and I've been doing the presidency of GREA for the 6 years, and I'm getting ready to start my third term. And I've learned so much in this job, but I wanted to globalize the message that as educators, we have a profound responsibility to put racism on the table and keep racism on the table in conversations about public education. Historically, there are too many examples of schools harming students and families of color. It is undeniable that unconscious bias plays a part in everyday decisions that are made in the classrooms and schools. The majority of the teachers in GRPS are white. So it's our union that has the responsibility to its members to help them be better at identifying their biases and getting uncomfortable in confronting the systemic and institutional racism that our children and families continue to face. Systemic and institutional racism is real, and public schools are an institution that interacts with people of color, Blacks, Indigenous, Latino communities. We are in a position to change the conversation. I'm here to learn. Thanks.
Thank you, Sister Mary. Brother Dan Tenhoppen, please.
Yeah, so I originally, I know I was talking with Kathy about putting this on, and I was surprised that she actually asked me to be a panelist, but I was pleasantly thankful for that, mostly because we need to have these conversations about everything that we do in life, because racism and bias has a play in literally every part of everybody's lives. So far this year, we've seen, the last couple of years, seen children in cages, brown people and children in cages, African American males, by and large, getting shot and killed by police. We're seeing across this virus that comes out, in who's dying from this virus. It's mostly Black and brown people. This is a very important thing that we have to do, and we have to have this discussion, and in many facets as we humanly possibly can, because it's the right thing to do. We have to do it, and everybody should be able to have some respect and dignity for everything that they do. It's unconscionable about where this country has actually gone in these last few years. We have backpedaled. I thought when we elected Barack Obama that many of these things will have been a little bit solved. Not solved in general, but it would make the world a better place. But I can't believe today that it feels like I'm 20 years behind where I was at when 2008 was. And this really upsets me to the core of my person. So I'm here originally because Kathy did ask, but also because this has to go on in so many different places of all of our lives, and we need to really free our minds and listen to others about their experiences. And we need to, as white folks, we need to back up our Black and brown brothers and sisters in their fight for dignity and justice.
Thank you, Brother Dan. Is Sister Diana Catola here? Okay, Diana, would you please go next? Thank you. Unique, there you are. Thank you.
Well, Kathy sent me an email, and I was very intrigued about what we were going to discuss on this panel. I'm sick and tired of what's happening in this country. It's been happening. It doesn't seem to get any better. And when you get angry, you have to stand up and do something about it. So I'm going to try to help in any way that I can.
Thank you very much. Brother Ryan Bennett, please.
All right, good evening, and thank you for having me. I think this is an important discussion to have. I decided to join it. I was thrilled just to be asked. I'm a second generation steam fitter from UA Local 174. I'm also a white kid from the suburbs, so I don't know a whole lot about institutional racism. I do know that I come from a predominantly white local union, white male local union, and my local union is not reflective of the diversity of the cities and the communities in which we work. It's not intentional that we are not, but we need to go above and beyond and make sure that young urban Americans understand the opportunity that a trade and a craft like ours can offer. So like Sister Mary and everyone else, I am here to learn, and I'm looking forward to the conversation.
Thank you so much, Ryan. Brother Sean Egan, please.
Hi, brothers and sisters. It's good to see everybody. I like having the cameras on. We don't, as Brother Tanabantu said, I hope I was close. We need to meet in person at some point because this is getting old real fast, right? So, but I appreciate the opportunity. Similar to Dan, I think Kathy knows me well enough that anything she asks for, she gets, and I appreciate the opportunity to be with her. I am a huge supporter of the A. Randolph Institute and have been my entire labor career. I think it's one of the most crucial vehicles that we have to create the kind of solidarity and equality that we're actually looking for in the labor movement. I am thrilled to participate today because I believe we're at a precipice where we can have honest conversations. I know that for a long time we've talked about equality and justice in this country, and we've continued to not see it. And fortunately, through all of these bad things, any small sliver of silver lining is that the discussion has changed. It's not about what we can do for a certain group of people right now. People are recognizing that there's something in all of us that we need to fix as well. That we have these implicit biases because of the way we were raised or where we were raised. And it doesn't mean that person is evil, but if they don't know that it exists, they can't fix it. Now, some people we know that we're fighting against are just on the wrong side of this thing altogether. But many folks are trying to do the right things all the time and just don't fully understand what's happening. So I'm excited that we can finally have an open and honest discussion with each other, not trying to offend each other, being ready to learn about ourselves, that we have these things built into us from our own experiences that we have to change. And we can do it as long as we can talk about it.
Thank you so much, Sean. Paul McLennan, please, brother.
Oh, thank you. Tandabantu is a mentor of mine, as he is to a lot of people, as he said. And he asked me to be part of this conversation. I was born in the South, but raised outside Chicago and left in 1977 to come back to the South to organize, and worked in a cotton mill where I had a connection with Crayola when we were organizing with the Amalgamated Clothing and Textile Workers Union. The reason I'm here is because, having lived and organized in the South for more than 40 years, I have seen how the conditions that workers face across the board, on the job and in the community, have all been affected by this legacy of white supremacy and slavery, the low level of unionization. It's all connected. The wealth that was generated through hundreds of years of an obscene, horrible system that we're still living with. And just to give you an example, only in the last week now, our local community organized to take down a Confederate monument. And when I've had a chance to speak at rallies, I identify myself as a union member. And I say that the same people who supported putting up this monument in 1908 are the same people who defended the system of slavery, are the same people who defended Jim Crow segregation, and are the same people who organized and fought as hard as they could against unions. So I think the problems that we're facing today, kind of the convergence of all this with the pandemic, with the economic crisis, and with what we're seeing in terms of the uprising against police killings, point to a fact that we have deep systemic problems we have to address. And the only way we can address all these problems is if we're united. And we have to understand how we've been divided intentionally. Divide and conquer is an old idea. And it's past time for us to address the reasons for that and the people who've benefited from it, and build a movement that can transform this country and save this planet too. Because the same people I think that we can say are responsible for so much violence have wrecked the planet too, all in the name of greed and making money. And white supremacy has been a big part of their ability to do that. So I'm really appreciative of the chance to have this conversation, because it's so important. We have to have it.
Thank you, Paul. I want to move right along. I appreciate everyone's initial answer. And so now that we've kind of introduced ourselves to each other and talked about our basic motivations, I want us to drill down a little bit more. We've obviously been hearing a lot the last several weeks about structural racism in the policing that goes on in our respective cities across this country. Now, I'm sure you have noticed, as I have noticed, that everyone who talks about the problem does not use the same language. For example, we've heard Mike Pence talk about race relations. We hear people raising white supremacy. We hear people talking about implicit bias as well, and also structural racism. So here's the question. Why is racism in the labor movement an important topic now? That's the question. And I just want to offer this before you begin to speak. Let us, because we're all trying to learn, and this is, I'll ask you to be patient with me, because this is where the teacher in me comes out. I'm always trying to get my fellow activists, my family members, as well as those who I sometimes am in a position to share knowledge with as a teacher. I'm always trying to get us to be explicit and specific about the language that we use, because the language that we use directs us in how we're trying to think about things. And if we think about things in certain ways, then that affords us a greater opportunity to be able to act in ways that are going to be adequate. So I'm going to ask you to think about why it is you use the terms that you use as you try to answer this question. So here's the question. Why is racism in the labor movement, in the U.S. labor movement, an important topic now? And it might still be raining and thundering where you are, Sister Cleola. So would you start us off?
Well, let me say this. For the vision of what systemic racism is, it means a lot of things to different people. I think it was Ryan who said a bit about his background and not actually feeling or realizing what the impact or what it feels like to be hampered by racism. That's what I got from your comments, Ryan, and that was very open and honest. There was a study years ago where there was a professor actually who asked her class of all white students, um, would you like to live one day as a black person? Raise your hand. No one raised their hand. And she then followed it up with the question, is it because you don't know what it's like? And heads started nodding. And then she asked the real question, or because you do know what it's like and know that that's not something that you want to go through. Systemic racism is not brand new. Our communities have been systematically made different by what's provided for the citizens of the communities where they live. There used to be plantations there. Well, there still are some if you go deep enough into some areas. But right in Chicago and Philadelphia and Washington, D.C., and New York, and you name the metropolitan city, there is still the plantation structure that's there that makes the community systemically impacted. Food deserts where the food is secondary. You have to watch the labels to make sure you don't die from food that is already expired. Financial deserts where you have title lenders, money lenders, and all of that kind of lending structure, but no brick and mortar banks or ATMs that are accessible to people to do their banking. Where there's no broadband for a community because they have not built it into the infrastructure, so the people of the community cannot participate in those things where the common language is, well, all you need to do is go online and take care of X, Y, and Z. That is not going to happen because it does not exist in a systemically disenfranchised community of people. That's a fact. That's not anything that's made up or happenstance. And inside the labor movement, when we have conversations where there are brothers and sisters who have never been exposed to something that has been systematically implemented on everyday life, it's really hard to have a conversation of honesty where you don't fall into the trap of blame gaming or resentful or accusations or pointing fingers. But we have a duty to those members that we represent to speak up and speak out about those things that are absolute. And systematic racism is absolute. Systemic circumstances exist in the labor movement based on the criteria for how we live. But also, when we talk about various entities like jobs that are available to people of color and how they come into the movement. The whole 9 yards of implementation for discipline is also systemically set. And moving up in the labor movement, there's a question that gets called when we talk about who are we talking for and to about leadership. Those are the systemic kinds of things that exist. We know about it, but do we externalize it or do we suppress it because it's an uncomfortable conversation? Well, now that we've watched a man die because of systemic racism with a knee on the neck, all of those abilities to deny knowledge have been taken away. It's raw, it's naked, and everyone knows that it does exist. We just have to be very focused on identifying it in the areas where we live, work, and do our business, and speak to it and call the injustice as we see it. I hope that answers your question.
That certainly gets us started in some very thought-provoking directions, and we certainly thank you. I'm going to skip around a little bit. I want to make sure to get everyone in, and one of the things that's really good about this, uh, and Kathy, I want to just single you out for a moment and thank you and other members of the Grand Rapid Grand Rapid chapter. I want to thank you explicitly for bringing us together because we have various levels of experience. And one of the things I've noticed is that sometimes people who haven't had the same experiences as other people, they see things more clearly sometimes than folks who've been around for a while, because folks who've been around for a while can become inured or accustomed to seeing things a certain way. So let me skip around a little bit. Ryan, I'm gonna ask you to jump in on this same question.
Thank you. Yeah, I think, the timing is right in every institution right now to talk about race. In my institution and my local union, I'm the youngest leader of the local union in my position that's elected every 3 years that we've had since our inception into the greater Grand Rapids area. We've been around since 1900, but we've only been 174 that encompasses our entire jurisdiction since 2000. So we got to really evaluate what we're doing and why we're doing it. And this is the absolute right time to have these conversations, because the conversations that my members are having on job sites, they're not the conversations of inclusivity. They're not the conversations of how do we take someone and help them along their journey to even just into the local union. Take race out of it just for a second. We have so many of our members that are quick to demonize other workers just because of the profession that they're in or the career path that they've chosen. And that is exactly the opposite of why I'm proud to be a union member. I'm proud to be a union member because we were always taught to lend a hand up. And it didn't matter whether you were the fast food worker or the custodial worker or who you were, you had the same rights to equality and the same. You were deserving of a fair wage no matter what your position was. You show up to work, you work hard every day, just like we do. And we need to be there to be better allies, not only to workers, but in our organization specifically, we've got to figure out a way where we can be more representative of the communities that we serve. And that means that we have to have an honest look at ourselves and why don't we have the diversity levels that we should? Because we're recruiting from the areas that are much more diverse than our membership is representative of.
Thank you. Diana?
I'm sorry, I've been retired for 12 years, so I don't have quite the experience with the local members as many of you are who are still active. I'm basically here to learn.
Well, let me respectfully do two things. I'm going to accept your your explanation, but I'm going to push you just a little bit further, because if we are here to learn, it will mean that we may not step completely away from our comfort zone, but we need to change the way we're sitting in our seats. So let me come back to you. If you were talking with us on the last day or during the last week of your job, before you retired, how would you answer this question then? What did racism mean to you in the workplace and perhaps even the trade union movement that you were in then?
Well, I live up north. I live in Traverse City and I'm from the Upper Peninsula. So racism isn't as apparent because we have a low population base. But I have a cousin, my cousin Andrea, the stuff she deals with every day on the job. She works at the YMCA in Kalamazoo. She and her family, the issues they're constantly up against. That's one of the reasons I'm on this call, because I get so frustrated and I don't know how to help her or how to change things so that daily they don't have to put up with all the crap that she puts up at work. It's unconscionable. Why shouldn't she be able to just go to work like I do her job, get paid, go home, and not have to deal with all this extraneous stuff that just infuriates me? I'm sure it infuriates her as well. we have brief conversations, but as far as the workplace, again, we have so few minorities up north. I can't even tell you the last time I ran into someone of color at work. Of course, that was 12 years ago, so I don't remember that far back, but
All right, thank you. Paul?
Okay. Racism in the labor movement. This is what comes up for me. I was just checking real quick. So Michigan passed a right to work law in 2013, and Trump carried Michigan in 2016. And living in the South and looking to Michigan the way the Midwest, where I'm from, as a bastion, as a stronghold of union strength. What the hell happened? How do you pass a right to work law in Michigan? And how does Trump carry the state? That tells me something is going on, certainly deindustrialization, and we know about Flint, for example. But it also says something to me about the appeal that this white supremacist, women-hating man had for white men and women who supported him and his agenda. So that's a question for me. And it's also, I'm not trying to put it on Michigan because we certainly have our hands full here, but I'm going back to how the South and those who made money off of structural racism and continue to organize in the South has always been so important to me, because we're seeing the South all over the country now.
All right. Sister Mary? Bowens?
Okay, well, my answer comes from a little bit different approach, I think, because when I think about racism in the labor movement, I come back to our particular union. And knowing that 80% of all teachers are female, and I would imagine that most of them are white, I keep looking back to the universities and the high schools and even the middle schools. What are they doing to encourage students to become educators? And so I do get to speak at colleges, talk about our union and what it does. And what I've found is the kids that we're seeing come out of college are a couple generations displaced from unionism. If they weren't raised in a household that had union parents like I did, they don't understand what it means. They just know it's money that comes out, you have to pay to be part of, but they don't understand what it does. They don't have the history. So that's one of the things that we need to put into our upcoming teachers so that they have a sense of what the labor movement means. The other thing is that I think MEA and NEA, our state and national organizations, have grabbed a hold of this issue and have taken it on as with separate departments within the union on the social justice side. So we have within our local state a push for more education for our teachers so that they start to recognize the kinds of things that they're seeing. There's a virtual summer conference that's coming up And one of the sessions that I was looking at were organizing for equity and equality from the classroom to the boardroom. Diversity and inclusion driving to engagement, and recognizing privilege and embracing advocacy. Those are 3 of the sessions that they're having at the MEA summer conference. And they're going to be sold out. I think our members are starting to see, after they stop thinking about COVID on the top of their list and opening of school in fall, but they're still seeing the need. It's out there. So I'm excited to see what our members are doing. We're encouraging book studies. We're talking about the resources they have. There is a Center for Social Justice at our NEA. So I think the unions that, because we have to deal with children and families, not because we have to, but because we do, we're in a perfect position to advocate for the things that we need to get more of this brought forward and educate our young teachers to unionism and to their bias and unconscious racism.
Okay, thank you so much. Sean?
So one of the things I would like, so to talk about your point on language, I think using the phrases systemic racism are hugely important. And I think it's important for all of us in the labor movement to look at where we are. Everything that we see in this country is a result of that systemic racism. So when a fellow tradesperson like myself, when Brother Bennett mentions the makeup of his membership in the building trades being mostly white males, that's true of across all of the trades, and that's because of the systemic racism that we're built upon. There were trades where you couldn't get in if you weren't German. I mean, there was this long history of these pieces being built. And as we know, cohorts stick together, and they're going to choose people that look like themselves or are like themselves until we start breaking those walls down. So when we think about where we are, we have to recognize that the reason there's a dearth of African-American teachers isn't because of the teachers' union. It's because of a long history of those people being pushed in a different direction. When we look at the trades, it's a long history of the cohorts sticking together and keeping certain people out. And as leaders now, what we need to recognize in the labor movement is accept that and fix it. We can't, it's not like we can just go out and say, hey, it's better now, because we have to change the entire universe of the United States, of our own societies. And hearing Brother McLennan talk about the South a lot, one of the things I always like to talk about too is having spent some time in the South, recognizing that racism looks a lot different in the South, and knowing a lot of folks that have moved to the North, they will tell you that the North is as segregated as anywhere they've been in the South. And these are real problems, and there are real challenges that we have to face. Now, the other reason I use implicit bias is because we were built on these systems, and this is what we know, the vast majority of people I know don't consider themselves racist. A racist already knows he's racist, right? And I don't believe that I can convince somebody who looks like me to come to our way of thinking by starting out calling them, saying that you're a racist or that is racism, because I believe it's going to shut them down. Now, that's just my view of the world, and certainly my view is going to have a certain perspective. But we have to just say, all of us on this call or this Zoom right now know a labor union is the only path to a fair and equal workplace, because you can't write discrimination and racism into a contract. But our structures have to be realigned to recognize the communities that we serve and the people that we are serving, which are working people, which are Black, white, Latino, men, women, transgender, doesn't matter. Our organizational mission is fairness and equality, and we have to accept that challenge and these conversations and fix our systems and convince our members that it's the right thing to do. And we can do that, like I said.
Thank you very much, Sean. Dan?
Yes, I'm right there with you, Sean. There's no doubt about it. So coming from a United Way, about 5 years ago, we were looking at our own staff and seeing, we represent Kent County. How many staff are white, male, female, black, brown? And we came up that we were adequately short on all these categories. We had about 7.5%, even though over 20, around 21% of our county is made up of minorities. So we went on a stretch of saying, you know what, we need to have, our organization has to look like the community that we serve. And through that process, we have put together and made sure that when applications go out, they go out spread out through all different kinds of community sectors. It's not just application at a certain newspaper or a certain Indeed over here, but they get to the African American Grand Rapids Times and some of the Spanish speaking language newspapers. We are now at 27.5% of our staff are people of color, and with about 21, almost 22% people of color inside Kent County. And it can be done, but you have to there has to be some willpower to it also. You have to put some of your own might and muscle into making sure that that's going to happen and finding the right people in the right positions. I will tell you that our office is more impactful than it's ever been because of the people that we have working for it. All the different things that are going on, we have each other's backs. And it's been really, really quite sad because our many of our minority people that we work with, I see pain and anguish in them. You really do. And when I have private conversations with them, it's always, I'm just tired. I'm exhausted. These are the things that continually come up in my conversations because they're tired of having to deal with it over and over and over again. How many more have to die? How many more people do we lose? How many more fathers have to have that talk with their sons about how to act with a police officer present? I don't have to do that. I can't even imagine having to have that conversation with a child about how to act around a police officer. Just shouldn't have to happen. And like I said again, is we just need to keep the conversation going. I know there's work to do in many of our unions. And some of them are great. Some of them, they just need a little bit of help. But I think we can get there. But it's working at it and moving in the right direction, and having your staff that really realizes that this is the right thing to do, is to go down this path, because we're all there for the same things. We're trying to make a decent living for our family, trying to move ahead, hopefully get our kids in college, and they won't have to do the dirty old jobs that all of us had to do once upon a time. So it's kind of where we're all at. I really do appreciate the conversation today.
Thank you, Dan. Okay. So you just said something, Dan, and it brings me. We're at another question now, but I want to just take a moment and ask you, and I'm going to start with you and then go back around the other way, Dan. And I'm not picking on you. I want you to pull another layer or two off this onion. You just said, in with the utmost honesty, I don't have to have the same kind of conversations with my son that my black and brown co-workers have to have with theirs. That is a profound admission. And so what I want to do is I want to ask you to open us up to take that onion apart a little bit more. And if you don't have to have that conversation, why not? And what does it mean that you don't have to have that kind of conversation? Because it's a life and death conversation for many of us. And if you don't have to have it, and I'm not saying it's your fault you don't have to have it. That's not where I'm going. But obviously, as Sister Cleola and Sean and Paul and others have pointed out, we have been manipulated. We have been positioned differently in this society. We have been incorporated into various industries of labor, various vocations and jobs differently, based on a number of things that appear to make us different. So I have to have a conversation with my grandson and my granddaughter about what to do here in Aurora if you get stopped, not just by a white police officer, but by a black police officer who's had the same kind of training that his police buddies have had. You don't have to have that kind of conversation yet. Tell us what difference it makes that you don't have to do that. I believe Dan is muted, Kathy.
Thanks,
Go ahead,
Kathy. I completely agree with you. And when I came to this revelation, and somebody actually told me that's what, African American men had to do with their sons, especially, I was shocked. I was as shocked as I've probably ever had heard. I've never been shocked as much as when I heard that had to happen. And to this day, it hits me really hard. And it's also one of my coworkers that, so there's a little town up north of us, Rockford, and she says, "Oh, it's getting dark out. I need to go home." She's an African American lady, and I never thought of it like that, where she wants to get out of this mostly all white community that has on the edges a few people that like to fly the Dixie flag and things like that. She wants out of that neighborhood. She wants to get into her own neighborhood while it's still light out. I've never, these are things that come to us as white people, because we didn't, these things aren't not like in our families, and it's stunning. It's unjust as I don't even have words really to speak to say how terrible this is. Yeah. And I just don't. I've never really understood it, got it. And I tell you what, the police, when you have hairdressers that have to do more hours of dressing hair than a police officer has to do to get a badge, there's something wrong in society. Because that's about where I can end it.
Thank you. Thank you for tackling it, Dan. And I think you're being honest, and that's at the heart of what we're all trying to do here. Cleola, I see you raising your finger, so please go ahead.
Well, I'm glad you said that the way you did, because the question then begs itself, because you don't have to have that conversation with your children, what do you do instead? So that there is some real understanding of who and what people of color are up against. And I think that helps us down the road to understanding why disparities cannot be tolerated. Many of us have said to our friends of different ethnicities, because as the title of this town hall says, it's an uncomfortable conversation, but we can't run away from uncomfortableness. And this is not just for you, Dan. This is general, what I've seen in talking with everyone. If you don't have to tell your son, or any one of us on this call, tell your son or daughter, because they're killing young Black girls too, to put your hands on the steering wheel when a cop comes, what are you telling them instead? You need to be sure and explain what that looks like for a Black child. What kinds of things that are happening to them to cause some of the reactions that white people, brown people, other people see from Black people that they don't get. Some will say, well, you need to follow and, obey the law and whatever, but we have done that. We know, put your hands on the wheel. We know that if they say, give us a registration or a driver's license, men and women, we say, I am getting my registration or my driver's license from my wallet, or I am getting it from my glove compartment, so that there's no confusion about what you're reaching for. Because we don't get questions as a people, we get a reaction. It's supposed to be protect and serve, but for Black people, it's, okay, calm down, Cleo. It's not the same. We've got to be able to give another kind of lesson, is the point that I'm saying. Don't lose the opportunity to tell these children who are not Black about what it's like to see that Black experience. Everybody on this call knows what it's like. You've seen it in living color. But we've got to articulate it to our kids who are not Black, to our friends who are not Black, and make it plain what it feels like and what it looks like. That's what I'm saying. Not just you, Dan. Everybody on this call, please hear that from us. Please hear that from us.
I'd just like to say thank you, because sometimes when I initially heard some of the stuff, it's so shocking to me that when the first time that I really had nothing to say, and I would like to know what is the best avenue. Obviously, talking to other white people about this experience that I now know is a common occurrence for virtually every single family is probably the best circumstance or thing that I could probably do. So I appreciate that, Cleola.
So let me twist it just a little bit, Mary. I want to stay with what we're talking about with respect to the police and workplaces, structural racism in workplaces. But because you are an educator and have such an important job as an educator, Mary, and also because here in Denver, we have been involved for at least the last year and a half, or maybe 2 years now, since we got back, in a really difficult struggle with the Denver public school system. And so I want to sort of take the conversation we've had thus far. I'll get to everybody else in just a moment. But Mary, I want to twist it just a little bit, and I want to ask the question to you in this way. What do you tell a white coworker or the mother or father of an Anglo-American child? What do you say to them about the danger of white supremacy in the education that goes on in the schools? What difference does it make to a white family that their children are being taught white supremacist values in 2020?
Wow. I was going to go a completely different way with that question. I'm not sure I can speak to that.
Do your best, whatever.
I know.
Mary, if
I'm not sure I understand.
Mary, if it will help, let's start where Cleola and Dan left off. Let's go back and let's ask you to address this issue of what do you say to fellow white educators, parents, or even teachers? What do you say to them about the kinds of messages that they have to give to white students in a classroom if those students then have to leave school and walk out in public spaces? What do you say to them as a white teacher to a white student about how he or she conducts himself or herself with regard to police?
I can't even fathom an opportunity that I've had for that kind of a conversation. But when we talk about the police in the schools, I have more of an understanding about what's happening with our students and their exposure to police or security officers within our schools. And that was kind of where I wanted to go with the question, the answer to that question, because I think that in Grand Rapids Public Schools, there are way too many police officers. There are way too many security people that I have seen do some extremely aggressive things with students in high schools. I was the homebound teacher for 10 years, so I got to visit a lot of schools, and I did mostly secondary. And it was kind of stunning to see some of the behavior that I saw when I would be in the high schools. And there have been a lot of articles lately, too, about removing the police from the school systems. There's been a more apparent school to prison pipeline conversation that's been going on. And I guess what I would love to see is a reduction in security staff and police in the schools, and more of the kinds of services that the kids need. So whether it's social work or mental health support, I would love to see smaller class sizes, because then the teacher has the opportunity to build a relationship with that student so they can affect some change. That's kind of where I wanted to go with the question about police and students, because that's the experience that I've seen in Grand Rapids.
All right, thank you.
Sorry.
No. We're all learning, and we knew when we stepped into this space for discussion that we didn't all have identical experiences. And that is both a strength, and it can also be a limitation. But if we try to be honest, we can overcome any limitations that we have. Paul, you want to take the question next? Do you need me to reframe it? You're muted, Paul. Okay.
Okay. Yeah, please reframe.
Okay. So we started out talking about racism and policing, and then we kind of shifted to the question of racism in workplaces and unions. So why is it important to talk about structural racism in workplaces and unions in 2020? We hear a lot about policing. We are hearing now even more conversation about structural racism in, well, not structural racism, but we're hearing much more talk about essential workers. And we can see that racism is a problem in workplaces, but we don't often hear on CNN or even MSNBC people talking with workers about what their lived experiences are. So what I want to ask you, Paul, is why is it important for workers, and in this instance, particularly white workers, to talk about white supremacy and or structural racism in the workplaces and the unions of where they are?
I'm going to go back to what I said earlier about Michigan and the right to work law and Trump carrying the state. There's a problem. Union members, white union members in particular, all of us all over the country have to address is what is the appeal of pro-management politicians who get elected to pass legislation like that, and a white supremacist president who carries the state. I think we have to get at why people who are angry, justifiably, when we look at what policies like NAFTA did to states like Michigan. How do we deal with this anger that's being misdirected? Because our salvation as a labor movement depends on our unity. And if our members are being manipulated, like you said, Tandabantu, we got to get to the heart of that. We got to get to how do we present an alternative, not just in terms of diversity and inclusion, but a whole economic program that addresses that anger of why I lost my job, why it went to Michigan, why the water in Flint is not clean. All these questions are legitimate. The problem is they're being misled. I have a friend who lives in rural Michigan who told me he saw the yard signs flip from Bernie to Trump. What was the common thread there? There's some thread where Bernie was appealing to some of these working class issues. I don't think he was that great on race, but he had an appeal because he could talk about corporations and CEO salaries. And then when he didn't make it as the nominee, people felt, well, okay, I'll go vote for Trump because he's going to drain the swamp. He's against all the corruption in Washington. So we have to address in our unions, in our house, this poison that has infiltrated our house. And I was thinking, it hit me, how could we allow these people to out-organize us? We're union members. This is our life. We organize. That's what we do. How have we allowed this to happen? And I think one of the problems is we have to take on these issues wherever they are. And I looked up a case today. Philando Castile was killed by police in 2016. He was a member of the Teamsters for 14 years. He worked in the public school system, and he was loved by the children he served. Is that a union issue? Is it a bread and butter, wages, pension, grievance issue? No, but it's a union issue. When a union member gets killed by the police, and the Teamsters issued a statement about that. So all these issues that where we find structural violence are union issues. And I just want to say again about this anger. There's anger out there. There's a lot of anger out there, and we as union members have a way to address it in a way that uplifts everybody and builds unity, not in the divisive hatred, fascism of these people we're confronting now.
Thank you. Sean?
Which question do you want me to jump on?
You can, at this point, hit on, if you want to pick up where Paul left off, go ahead.
So we have the discussion in our house. I've had the privilege of a more diverse upbringing. So I've had more exposure to different types of people, and it's made me a better person. And diversity does that any chance you get. And in our house, I would always point to, with my children when they were young, that if we took a young black child, let's say 2 or 3, and a young white child, say 2 or 3, to the playground, they don't see it, right? They just go and play. There's no animosity, there's no hate, they just go do their thing, which tells you absolutely racism is taught. In Sean's worldview, racism is taught and learned from your parents. when we have those discussions in our house about what would we tell or what would we do with the police, we always recognize that it's an experience that we do not have to have, that we can't truly understand the fear, the anxiety. You know, as a white guy, you know, we see a cop come up to the window, we go, what the hell do you want, right? And get out of here. We don't have to worry about those types of things. But the important thing for us to talk about is that we will not tolerate it either, that we cannot sit idly by while these things are happening in our community to other working families, because that's what we all are, and just accept these as a fact of life. We have to stand up, we have to be vocal, we have to fight, we have to use whatever leverage, whatever tool, whatever platform we're given to make sure that we're addressing these issues as fairly and justly as we can, because this is supposed to be the land of the free, but we don't see it that way, right? So they're hard discussions to have. It's weird to try to answer it because in our house it's so ingrained that, you know, I have to keep my children from burning things down. That we can do it. That's what the point of it all is, that we can do it as if we're committed to each other through love, through understanding, through our recognition that we're all working families. You know, Matewan, there's a great line, miners trying to organize, right? There's two types of people in this world, those that work and those that don't. And we're on the working side of that. And we're all in it together, whether we want to be or not. And we have to stand together, whether we want to always or not, because that's what fairness and justice requires. So, you know, it's just so odd to, and with my children, I've likened it to sending our soldiers off to war, right? The challenge for a soldier in Afghanistan is that when he looks around, he can't tell who the enemies are. Most of the folks are not enemies, but he can't tell. And it may not be a good analogy, but I've likened that to the African-American experience in our country, right? That you may not be able to see who your enemies are, and then they come out in the form of cops or others that we see doing these horrible things all of the time. My daughter said, she's 20 right now, almost 21. She said, I can't remember the time in my life where this wasn't happening. And I said, I can't remember a time in my life either where this wasn't happening. And, you know, now is a time where everybody is listening, everybody is ready, everybody is having the discussion. I think Brother Floyd's death was so obvious and so gross. There was no excuse to point to. There was no, you know, I saw something shiny, all of the stuff that we normally hear when these things kind of things happen, that we can finally get beyond the coating it over and start having the real discussion about where we are in this country and where we need to go.
Thank you, Sean. Ryan and Diana, we still need to come back to you. But if you all will allow me, something that that Sean and Paul both pointed to obliges me to just take a quick point of privilege, if I may, and share an experience that I had with all of you. Let me tell you about an experience I had when I was working for Carbon Fuel Coal Company in West Virginia in the 70s. We were coming, and we went back to work after the miners' strike had been poorly ended. And so one afternoon, we were coming out, and we had to all line up at the man trip at the base of the 500-foot incline. We were working in a slope mine, and some of you may be from West Virginia or may have kin in West Virginia and Kentucky, and they will tell you about what it means to work in a slope mine. We were 500 feet down, and on some days we were 3 or 4 miles back inside the bowels of the earth. And it's a scarifying experience that a lot of people go through in West Virginia and other places in Appalachia. But anyhow, I was coming out with the only other black worker in the mines, and I overheard a white worker say nigger. And I'm just gonna be straight out. I mean, I don't like to sugar. It takes a long time to sugarcoat stuff, and I'll just tell you straight out. I heard him use the term nigger. Now, there's only two of us in the area walking up, and there's a big crowd of other white workers standing around. So I turned to my coworker Donnie, and I said, "Donnie, did he say what I thought he said?" And Donnie, who called me Ives, he said, "Ives, I hope he didn't say it." And so I said, "I'm gonna go over and talk to him." He said, "Oh, Ives." I mean, he was concerned about what I was going to do once I got over there. But anyway, I walked over to him and I said, "Excuse me, man." I said, "Did I just hear you use the N word?" He said, I did." I said, "Wait a minute." I said, "I didn't come over here to knock you out. I came over here to talk with you." He said, "Yeah, I use it. I use it. I didn't mean nothing by it, but I use it." So I said, "Well, let me ask you three questions." I said, "Can I talk to you just for a minute?" He said, "Yeah." So I said, "Can I ask you three questions?" He said, "Yeah, yeah." I said, "Do you have any children?" He said, "Yeah." I said, "Okay." I said, "Does it put any more food on your plate or your child's plate when you call me nigger?" And he kind of looked at me like, I don't think he knew whether to fall dead or go hide. He was just dumbfounded. I said, the second question is this. Uh, who was it who forced us to come back into the mines? Who's the president who forced us as a union and a body of workers to come back into the mines? He said, Jimmy Carter. I said, "Okay, is Jimmy Carter black?" He said, "No, he's white." I said, "My third question is this. Given the fact that we went out to try to defend the miners' card for the health of our families and ourselves, and given the fact that we're still having that fight, even though we've been forced back in the mines, and you are down here dirty, and I am standing here next to you dirty, do you not understand that you, my white union brother, are the new nigger?" He looked at me, and it was as quiet in that area, you could have heard a rat going to the bathroom on cotton. That's how quiet it was. My point is this. I think a number of us are already seeing that when you have a situation like we have in this country right now, that white workers have as much of a responsibility to address this issue with other white workers as they have trying to address it with black and brown co-workers. And it changes the way you talk about it, but you talk about it. That's the issue. You don't let it, you don't let it just lay. And I felt like it was important to point that out because so often in my human rights work and as a union organizer and as a labor educator, I have run across white brothers and sisters who have basically had the idea that it's only black and brown and indigenous folk who have this problem of race. And some of you have already spoken very eloquently to it. White supremacy affects everybody. It affects us differently. And that's the issue. So since it affects us, we have to figure out how we're affected by it and address it with those people we say we love. Because if we don't address it, it festers. If you don't stop a cancer, it continues to metastasize. And it will metastasize in your house and your church and et cetera. So I hope that kind of takes what some of you have said and kind of puts a little bit more oomph under it. I believe Ryan and Diana, we've not yet heard from you. So So get in where you feel like you can fit in.
Oh man, thank you. So yeah, what can I do in my position to help bring a conversation like this to a union break table? Because that's what, in my opinion, needs to happen within my organization. The lack of diversity has bred further lack of diversity. And to Brother Paul's point about how we got here with the election and with the right to work, we've got a lot of people in our local that do not vote based on their economic interest, and I cannot convince them otherwise. Until we are having conversations as in-depth as this at a construction site break trailer, I don't know how we get there. So what I can do to help affect that change is I can focus on how and where we recruit people from, because there is a lack of experience with careers like mine in urban communities where the young people don't see a plumber and a pipe fitter or a welder or an electrician or a carpenter or a mason as a viable career opportunity because they don't know anybody who has chosen that career path. So that's where I think us in the building trades and us in labor in general have to be more intentional about not just where we recruit, but how we do it. So we disseminate all of our apprenticeship information the same way we always have, but we got to take it one step further, and we got to put our trade and our careers out in front of some of these young urban communities and let them know, hey, there's an opportunity here for you. We will welcome you in as our brother, and you will help change our organization from the inside out.
Thank you, Ryan. Thank you. Thank you. Diana, you are the last one to address this issue or these issues at this point. But certainly, even though you live in an area where you don't see a lot of folk who are Black or brown or indigenous, perhaps, you are very concerned, or you wouldn't be on the call. So, how do you address this problem?
I think Diane may have had to leave the conversation.
Diane's gone? Okay.
Diane's gone, yes.
All right. So let's move right along then. I'm sorry we lost her. I hope we didn't lose her because anything we did or said. But the last question is this. With all the talk about structural racism and policing, what difference does it make for those of us who don't have to confront police? What difference does it make to talk about, or how significant is it for us to talk about structural racism or white supremacy in the church we go to, in the workplace where we work? How do we insert ourselves into these kind of conversations, even if it's very, very, very uncomfortable? Paul? And the reason I come to you, Paul, is because I know you've had some recent experience in Georgia waging struggle around monuments to the Confederacy and monuments to white supremacy. So how have you had conversations, or how do you think we can have conversations if we're white? Or if we're people of color, how do we have conversations with other people who might be different from us and talk about white supremacy as it has actually played out?
We worked on this campaign to remove the monument for the last 3 years, and we attracted a lot of really good people. And one was a young white woman who just recently got her PhD in history from Georgia State University. And any chance that she had, she spoke about the history of the monument. And why was it erected in 1908? Not after the Civil War to memorialize the dead, but many years later. Well, it turns out that in 1906, there was a Atlanta race riot, which was basically white, kind of like Tulsa, where white terror mobs came into the black community. 2 years later, the United Daughters of the Confederacy put up this monument in front of the courthouse as a way to intimidate anybody who had, any person of color who had to go there to do business. So in a way, this monument is a gift to us from 112 years ago to talk about and educate about who put this up, why they put it up, and why the state of Georgia went to such great lengths to protect it. It took a mass movement and a recent uprising to get past all that. But I think the conversation that we had with the community, which was mostly white, was about how this did not represent our values. This was a monument to hate. It was a monument to division. And it had no place in our town square. So I think history is important to talk about. And as a union member, like I said, the direct connection between white supremacy and the lack of unionization, the conditions of workers in the South across the board, any quality of life issue you look at. And we were bold. I think you have to be bold about this. You have to take it on directly.
Yeah.
And we won. They brought the crane in.
Good. Very good. Very good.
Yeah, close to midnight on the morning of Juneteenth.
Okay. Leola, I saw your finger go up again. I think she's muted though, Kathy.
I got it.
Okay. I was actually saluting Paul's effort and the fact that the victory actually was on Juneteenth made it even sweeter. But if I can, I see several of our leaders who were not a part of the panel who are on this call, and I certainly don't want to go without saying something to them first because they are the warriors in the field that help these kinds of conversations keep going. The regional rep, Andre Washington, is on the phone and on the Zoom, who has done exemplary work. Going to the Supreme Court with our issues when it comes to voting, when it comes to disenfranchisement. You can't be scared. You just need to step out there and do something. Or like John Lewis says, make some good trouble. And Andre is good at making good trouble. He can make some pretty daggone bad trouble sometimes too, but he has made some good trouble. And I saw LaDonna Sims' name up, also good for good trouble. Working her butt off all the time because she's got to put up with Andre. I saw John Lacey's name up, who's a chapter president of ours, who is doing his thing, raising the tough questions in a community that is not just Black folk, but is all folk. Because one thing that John made me understand is that if people don't know each other, they can't trust each other. And I thought I knew that and understood that until it got articulated in a room where there was just two head of we, him and me, and the rest of the folks were white folks. I've watched Jerry King, who just went through COVID-19, he and his wife Tori both, and having to lay an example still for why it's important that we continue to give the message. It's those kinds of pieces that continues to make everything that we're talking about tonight so vitally important. Deborah Ali and Brenda Moon, who I've known since Jesus was a baby, all are the ones that will give you that extra energy to keep going. But I say to my brothers and sisters, it doesn't matter what color. If we don't have the talk, of trust, of honesty, what's really the feeling that you're feeling. We're going to miss this opportunity that's here before us now. There's not going to be this kind of time that come around again soon. So it may be tough. It may be uncomfortable, but it is absolutely necessary. Our children are leading this. There are no national known figures that are out there running it, although they're running in the front of the kids trying to take it over because they can't help themselves. But these young people are saying enough is enough. Let's teach one another as we go through this. And those crowds are black and white and brown and Asian, you name it, they are out there. Because some of the most racist kinds of things that we've seen over this period, and I'm gonna hurry up, is how your president flipped the script and made Asians a target for a while because the black piece was just too hot for him. And I have not seen Asian people take that kind of a fight to the street or to verbalize it in a while because they just did not do that. But baby, the lessons were taught and the voices were lifted when the reminder came about Japanese internment camps, a part of our history. When it talked about those who fought Pearl Harbor, a part of our history. So this is the time that all of our history can come to the forefront. And I'm excited about this time. If we don't take advantage of it, that's on us. And nobody can own our stuff. And I almost cussed, but thank God there's no preacher on the call. But we have got to own our stuff, or that will be your stuff until the day you close your eyes. That's what I wanted to say, sir, and to thank Kathy for her innovative ideas about what's going on. And Isaac, I don't see you still on the screen, but I know you wanted to say something. And Kayron is sideways, so I almost forgot him too. But it's got to be this time that we speak up and that we don't just go all black or all white or all brown or all this or all that. It's all of us in this mess together, and we got to take advantage of it. That's all I got.
Sean, were you putting up your hand or to salute, or are you raising your hand to say something?
Yeah, if I might, I just a real quick tag on to what President Brown said on the trust. As a leader, as a white man, I just trust what Sister Brown is telling us, right? Like we've said, I can't have the experience that you've had, but I can trust what you're telling me and we can fight together on it. So let's, as we're capitalizing on this moment, just trust what you're hearing. It's happening. I promise you it's happening. What everybody's telling us is true. We don't have to see another George Floyd. We don't need to see any of that kind of stuff to just push together. So I appreciate you saying that trust. And I'm hopeful that we're at a moment now where we will just trust that these experiences are real, because I know they are, they are, and hopefully we'll do that together.
Thank you. Mary, you have something you wanted to say to wrap up? Help us.
I'm working.
There we go.
Good. Thank you, dear.
There we go. I have to say that I am thrilled to have been here tonight. I have a lot of work to do, and I appreciate the opportunity to start this relationship, because I think even with students, with issues, with organizing, it all comes back to building the relationships so that you can affect some change. So thanks everybody for leading me.
Well, you have contributed as well out of your own lived experience, and we thank you for that. Dan, you want to say something to wrap up?
Yes, I'd just like to say thank you to everybody here. I met some great new friends. Kathy, obviously, we'll be seeing her for a long time now, seeing how she's now retired from her old factory rat job. So we'll probably be seeing a lot more of her, whether we like it or not. And she's going to be around, which is great. And I absolutely agree with President Brown. This ball up to the finish line. How many times have we been here? How many times do we don't have to be tired and just exhausted all the time. We need to push this to the finish line and get some things really done, and get it done now, because coming back, you sometimes don't get this opportunity again, and it could be a very long time. So let's just do it now. Let's push that boulder to the finish line and see what we get. So I really appreciate the experience here today. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Ryan, you want to offer some comments to wrap it up?
Yeah, no, thank you very much. I appreciate the dialogue. It's been very eye-opening for me. One of the questions I'd like to go back to is, what am I going to do with the time that I don't have to spend talking to my children about what to do if they get pulled over by the police? And that's something that really hit home with me. That's another layer of my privilege that I'm just beginning to understand. And those types of conversations are the conversations we need to start having with our young people and the people we're trying to get into our trade, so we can take this movement, this energy, and we can break it down, and we can help push. I mean, I know in my heart that I am not racist, but what I haven't done is I haven't been the best ally that I could be. And so I'm going to start being a more vocal supporter of my brothers and sisters of all races, the same way I have my union brothers back, my 174 brothers. I'm going to take that to the all workers and try to impress that upon our next generation, because they're going to be the ones leading before we know it. So thank you all for the conversation.
There you go. And thank you, Ryan. Yeah, you put into other words a long time guiding dictum of the trade union movement. An injury to one is an injury to all. Kathy, we've had I'm looking at a number of faces of good folks who've been sitting here for a minute. Do we have any questions so we can bring some of these folk in before we leave, or we just thank them for coming? How do we go forward now?
Well, I'll open up everyone's mic, and if anyone has any questions, raise your hand. Isaac had a question, but I don't see Isaac on the call now.
Okay.
Does anyone have any questions?
Let's do our best. And I want everybody, these questions are not posed to me. If you hear a question, speak up. Go ahead, Kathy. What in the world?
Okay, I'm trying to unmute everyone's mic.
Oh, okay, I'm sorry.
Anyone have any questions? Andre, do you have your hand up? I know you have something to say.
With the Andre.
But I want to first I want to acknowledge my national president, Cleola Brown. Every time she opens up her mouth and she says something, I always learn something new from her. And I'm just proud to be part of this great organization that's led by a great woman. Kathy, I want to thank you and the Grand Rapids chapter for putting this on and for having this honest conversation. And I want to thank all the panelists. I mean, some of the things that you were saying really hit home. And this is a discussion that's long overdue. So I'm glad that we had this. I'm going to cut myself off right now because I've been known to be long-winded. But I just want to say thank you, Kathy. Thank you, Grand Rapids. Thank you, the moderator. Thank you, Madam President. And thank you, the panelists. And thank all of the A. Philip Randolph Institute members and officers. And I'm thanking you in advance for all the great work that we're going to do in 2020 to make sure that everyone in the Midwest is registered, educated, and shows up on election day to cast a vote for a candidate or an issue of their choice. God bless each and every one of you, and may God continue to bless the A. Philip Randolph Institute, the senior constituency group of the AFL-CIO.
That's my man, Andre. All right, who'll be next? Any other questions? Jamal, Will, Frank, Brenda? Brother Moy?
Yeah, I'll say something.
Please.
I'm Bill Moy. I'm a railroad union leader for CS6 Railroad. So you can say I'm a product of A. Philip Randolph from being a railroad union leader. But I'm also a retired Air Force, so that's why you see a flag behind me. And again, A. Philip Randolph touched that also. So one of the things we need to do as union leaders, and I think it was said during the call, but not really spoken, education especially at the college level and grad school, tells new students that unions are bad. We need to change that paradigm. Remember that unions are there to help make life better for families. That's the key thing that's getting lost. Even my own kids, they have white collar jobs. Every now and then their manager will say something, oh, unions are bad. Oh, no, they're not. So we can educate our kids that carry their own. Maybe that one kid can put a seed on that 2 or 3 people that can make it 20. So that's what it's all about. Let's keep on doing the things we're doing, and let's go out there and make sure we can put a good, strong presidential team that can support the workers in November. Thank you very much.
Okay.
Is it your opinion that Katarina Marquez drank
Yep,
on the
and
floor?
one of the things that I've been doing is kind of reaching out to my old instructors from high school or my vocational school, and the superintendent of Kenwood Public Schools, to just see how I can get involved as much as possible. I got a daughter that goes to Kenwood Public Schools, to change that narrative of what some of the educators or that narrative of unionizing and organizing. And I just wanted to to continue to add value to this discussion here, and in any way I can to help progress this mission. So.
All right. Is anyone else? I muted everyone so that we wouldn't have that background noise. So anyone else want to say something? Okay. Eunice? Oh, Jerry?
Yeah, sorry, I had a bunch of kids in the neighborhood hanging out right in the intersection where a bunch of cars are driving past. So I'm like yelling at them and stuff, trying to stay muted and be professional. But I care about them, so I don't want to see them get hurt.
Absolutely.
So sorry about all that background
That's
noise
okay.
over here.
You're fine. Jerry?
Greetings, brothers and sisters. Jerry King, UAW Chrysler, and also state president of APRI and Metro Detroit president. Just want to thank President Harris and her team, Grand Rapids chapter, for putting this together. I learned a lot today, and it was a pleasure meeting each and every last one of you. And I look forward to the continued dialogue as we move forward to get out the vote and build the power necessary to make this systemic change we need. So thank you, everybody. And also my president and my regional rep, thank you guys, and always appreciate your mentoring and your support. Thanks.
Anyone else?
Kathy,
Yes.
this is Eunice. Listen, I am just thrilled to death to be here. I just want to say congratulations to all of you UAW leaders coming together to initiate this conversation. As awkward as it is absolutely necessary. So I just want to say congratulations and thank you. And it looks like this is the beginning of being on the right track and moving forward to the next step. Thank you so much. God bless each and every one of you.
Thank you.
Well, brothers and sisters, I know Kathy probably wants to say something to end. Charles, you getting ready to speak? Go ahead.
Uh-oh. Wait a minute, Charles. I'm coming. I'm so elated with this long list. There we go. Okay, Charles. Charles. Unmute, Charles. Okay, here we are. Hello, Charles?
Yes, I'm here.
All right.
I'm just glad to be here. You know, I'm here in Memphis. I'm a retired civil servant. You know, we had a good union in California where I worked, and I've been involved with a little bit with the Philip Randolph Institute here, and I've got some real good education, and I'm really glad to be here. So thank you all.
Andre?
Kathy?
Andre had his hand up.
Okay.
Unmute. Hello. Andre, unmute. It's not me this time, you all. It's Andre. There we go.
Oh, okay. I just, there was a young man on here. I think his name was Jamal. I think, yeah.
Yes.
If the young man could, he started talking, but if he could just tell us a little bit about himself. I thought I read somewhere in the chat, Jamal is over the Black Caucus of his union. So we got a young man there.
Yes,
if Jamal could come on and tell us who he is and give us his title. I want to hear his pedigree.
Well, I've been in the IBEW in 275 for 5 years now. The minute I got in, Sean was someone who was mentoring me to be as involved as possible. And so it's developed over time. We've done a bunch of different events together. We put on the trunk or treat, the A. Philip Randolph trunk or treat the last couple of years together. You know, I've been going to career fairs and different things like that. And, you know, I just like to give back as much as possible. My father was a UAW member. I got some cousins that are a little bit up there in the UAW as well. Gerald Kareem is one of my cousins.
Okay.
And I'm happy to be a part of something bigger than myself and bring some change and add value to the IBEW and organized labor and my community as well. So it's something that I'm very passionate about.
Well, my brother, since you love giving back, at the banquet table of the A. Philip Randolph Institute, there is a leadership seat for you right up front. What city are you?
I'm in Grand Rapids, Michigan. Yep.
Okay. Well, I thank you for joining our organization. I thank you for giving back to the A. Philip Randolph Institute, and I'll be watching you, and I look forward to you being a leader in this great organization. Welcome to the A. Philip Randolph Institute.
Thank you, sir. I appreciate it. With open arms.
Isaac is back on.
Yes.
Isaac, you had a question earlier. We missed it.
Isaac, please.
Yes. Yes, I did have a question. You know, in the communication earlier, it seemed like that the point was being danced around. Okay, it wasn't nothing dealing with how we are supposed to act as Black people. The point is supposed to be focused on the perpetrators, the Klansman mentality. Let me just use that. You know, let me call the Kello Black. All right, the Klansman mentality. All right, the ones who are, you know, in a small group or whoever or wherever they are, and they know a person who, you know, who present a Klansman mentality, who dislike Black people, or you know, look at themselves more superior than Black people or ethnic people or you know, Native Americans or whoever, and they really don't say anything. You know, they should be held accountable as well as the perpetrator. You know, my point is we are human beings for one. All right, human beings, no matter what the difference of our ethnicity may be. You know, we should learn how to treat human beings as human beings. Treat people the way that you want to be treated. That's my point. That's all. You know, I just had to get back on. Someone told me that they were trying to get me to to speak. I was getting ready for the bed. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I just really love the APRI of Randolph. I just love what they are about. I love everything about them. And seriously, it's time out for the okie doke. All right. So if we're not going to stand for the cause, we need to stand on the sideline because we fell asleep for 50 plus years. All right. Now it seems like that we are waking up. Let's stay woke. Number one, let's stay woke, and let's not settle for the okie doke. If you're going to change everything from the politician all the way down.
From the White House to the outhouse.
That's right. That's right.
Well, we hear you loud and clear. Thank you, brother. Thank you so much. Kathy, I don't know what happened to the screen function, but this would be my everybody went dark. So let me just say to everyone, thank you for participating. Thank you for joining in. And whether you were a panelist or someone raising a question, I hope we got all the questions that people had, comments. If we did not, if you sent in a question, perhaps we can try, Kathy, to begin with some of those questions or fold those questions in to our discussion next time, because this is our initial awkward conversation and we must go forward and continue this effort. So if I may, Kathy, I just want to say thank you to everyone for showing up. And just one last point, which is this. In 1972 or 1973, the Business Roundtable of the United States, which is an organization of employers and corporations, and to be more specific, it is a capitalist caucus. They came together because they recognized that the 1950s and 60s had led us into a period of upheaval in this country. And from one end of the country, from top to bottom, many people were concerned that we might be on the road to revolution, to transformation of all the institutions in this country. I was a part of that upsurge. So was Paul. I believe Sister Cleola was also, and Kathy. There are a number of us who were around, maybe we were younger, we obviously were, but we were just maybe getting started. But the point is this, here we are at another point in the history of this country where people are asking questions that we have not asked for 50 years. People are raising a hue and cry that has not been raised in this way with this many kinds of people in the streets for at least 50 years. I met a white woman years ago in Atlanta, Georgia, named Nanny Washburn. Nanny was a socialist. She told me to my face one day without any trepidation, she said, Tanabantu, I'm a communist. And I'm happy to be that way because I understand that the folks who run this country are not the folks who produce and make this country run. She told me this, and I'm going to share it with all of you. She said, if you live to see two upsurges in your life, you are blessed. If you live to see two opportunities to make fundamental change in the United States, you are blessed. I think we all can say that we're beginning to glimpse that we are at such a time, and we have work to do. And as Esther said in the Bible, we've got to do what we got to do, and if we perish, we perish. But we perish doing the right thing. I'm done, Kathy.